Hello everybody and welcome to Insider's Guide. Today we're finishing our discussion of one of the most surprisingly well-rounded mountains in Colorado, Steamboat. In this part, we'll be discussing the areas of the mountain home to Steamboat's extreme terrain. If you're looking for lower level terrain, check out one of the 3 previous parts, all about the rest of the mountain. With that, let's finish an Insider's Guide to Ski Resorts, Steamboat. We'll now move to the top of the Morningside lift to talk about these chutes, which, as you can see, are on the front side of the mountain. Confusingly enough, to access these chutes, you need to drop into Morningside Park, take the Morningside lift up, drop into the line of your choosing, ski down to Bar UE or Storm Peak, and then take that lift up. As you can probably infer, it's a really long lap to ski these chutes, and for the amount of vert you end up getting, it can feel a bit disappointing. However, this is still some of the more unique terrain at Steamboat, and if you have the ability, I do recommend checking it out at least a few times. This is genuinely the only terrain off the Morningside lift that I think is worth doing. In general, this zone consists of precipitously pitched, narrow, and technical glades with several obstacles hidden around. These chutes are not as gnarly as some of the lines in Fish Creek Canyon, which we'll talk about shortly, but they definitely command respect. Just because of the nature of the terrain, I'd highly recommend bringing a partner along and staying within earshot of each other. Before talking about the extreme terrain specifically, I want to talk about these 3 runs, Over Easy, Crow Track, and the Ridge. Over Easy is your standard groomed cruiser and is the most popular way back to the front side from the Morningside lift. Crow Track and the Ridge are both your standard single black glade runs, and the trees get denser as you go further down. Corridor is how you get to the top of Buddy's run from the Morningside lift. Be cautious about the Ridge because you're right on the boundary of Chute 1, which consists of some pretty hairy terrain. Okay, now let's talk about the extremes. Every gate from Chute 1 through the gully is accessible via the Morningside lift, even though it doesn't look like you can access Christmas Tree Bowl and the gully from Morningside based on the trail map. The remaining gates from No Names to East Face require a short 5-minute hike to the true summit of Mount Werner. These 3 chutes located right off the Morningside lift are all accessed via the same gate. Once you enter the gate, you traverse skiers right for Chute 3, go straight for Chute 2, and skiers left for Chute 1. In general, Chute 1 is the toughest of the 3, and Chute 3 is the easiest. I'm not too crazy about Chute 3 because the terrain is pretty lackluster. Chute 2 gets the most traffic, and as such gets scraped out very early on. Chute 1 is definitely my favorite, and I'd recommend it the most out of the 3. Ski down to the saddle of the ridge to access the Christmas Tree Bowl gate, which leads to the long, wide Christmas Tree Bowl zone. Christmas Tree Bowl starts out pretty technical at the top, but mellows out after the first 100 feet. I've also found some really playful drops and spines sprinkled in around the lower half of these trees, although keep in mind, the landings are fairly flat. It's overall a really fun, playful area that I would highly recommend checking out. The gully is very similar to Christmas Tree Bowl. It has a fairly challenging first section, but opens up after some time. The remaining runs require a very short hike to the top of Mount Werner. This hike looks kinda intimidating from the Morningside lift, but it's easier than it appears, only taking about 5 minutes. The No Names and North St. Pat's gates are adjacent to each other, but the terrain each gate services is quite different. No Names is actually one of the mellower glade runs in this area, and is a great first extreme line to try as Steamboat. The top part of North St. Pat's might be reminiscent of No Names, but it filters onto a very rocky face that can be really sketchy in the early season. It might feel intuitive to gravitate towards the East Face gate since it's the furthest back, but frankly, for the amount of vert you get, I prefer the other 2 summit gates. Now, when you get to the bottom of any line in this area, you'll have the option of taking one of 2 catwalks that serve as runouts. It can be tempting to drop into the trees below First Chance and take Last Chance instead, but I definitely recommend taking First Chance. The trees between the 2 runouts are very flat and aren't worth skiing in my opinion. From here, ski down to Bar UE or Storm Peak, the former on weekends and the latter on weekdays, and repeat the process we mentioned at the start of this video. Moving a bit further down the mountain, recall that from Part C, if you ski BC Skiway past the Storm Peak lift, you'll end up at the Pony Express quad. Pony is one of the better areas on the mountain for advanced skiers. Despite Pony's wide chair spacing and lower capacity, the Pony Express pod itself hardly sees major crowds or lines, which makes it a great place to get away from the hustle and bustle. Just beware that on the busiest powder days, you may see some lines at Pony from everyone trying to get to Mahogany, but these typically disperse fairly quickly in the morning. Longhorn is the only run in the pod that's consistently groomed and is great for intermediates. I'm honestly not sure why it's a blue-black, as it doesn't seem much steeper than most of the other blues at Steamboat. The remainder of the Pony pod is made up of a ton of advanced tree and mogul runs. The upper section of Pony is a big open face and doesn't really have great signage. As such, I just recommend picking a cut mogul line or uncut tree line and figuring it out from there. It's more fun to explore this zone than to necessarily stick to a certain line. The same can be said about the neighboring Mahogany Ridge Express, which we'll talk about shortly. Fetcher Glade has, unfortunately, gotten pretty thinned out over the years, so I'd recommend searching for better tree skiing elsewhere in the pod. The best trees in this pod are all the unmarked glades on the looker's right side, which can be home to outstanding powder and solid rock drops. Royal Flush is my personal favorite bump run in the pod. The Pony Express lift line, as expected, gets extremely skied out, and as such is my least favorite bump run in the pod. Diamond Hitch is a pretty unique and fun mogul/tree hybrid run. The most direct way to exit the Pony Express pod is via Longhorn to Wapiti Road to Bar UE. Both Chuckwagon and WJW are very short mogul runs that aren't that great. They also drop you next to the Storm Peak lift, which, as we talked about, gets crazy lines, so I'd recommend taking Wapiti to Bar UE instead. Half Hitch is another way of getting over to Bar UE, but I do find it to be a bit flat at the top. Finally, let's talk about the newest pod at Steamboat, Mahogany Ridge. Full transparency here, this is easily my personal favorite pod at Steamboat. It has some of the longest continual tree skiing on the mountain and by far the coolest terrain at the resort. The snow quality here is almost always excellent because the Mahogany Ridge pod usually sees very little lines. It's not that intuitive to get here, and even from the top of Pony, signage to get to Mahogany is very limited by design. To me, Mahogany feels like the backcountry within the bounds of a ski resort, and offers a haven for advanced and expert skiers, and for that, I can't rave about it enough. Let's first talk about everything directly under the lift, and then we'll talk about the good stuff in Fish Creek Canyon. To get to Mahogany from Pony Express, you have two options. You can either take the Fairway Catwalk or Middle Rib to Outlaw, which are both mogul runs. I prefer Fairway because it means you'll be able to access Mahogany's outstanding tree terrain right off the bat. From Fairway, which is located just a bit down Middle Rib, you can either take it all the way to the Mahogany Ridge lift line or drop into the upper section of Legend Trees. The lift line gets extremely skied out, so I'd personally recommend dropping into the trees, which can be home to fresh tracks days after a storm. From here, just like Pony, don't bother sticking with a specific run. I love bouncing between Legend Trees and thick of it by cutting through the Mahogany lift line. Edge of the World is your standard mogul run, but it very well may be the busiest bump run at all of Steamboat. Among a pod of terrain I absolutely love, this is the only run I'd truly recommend avoiding if at all possible, as it gets unbelievably skied out, icy, and bare even in peak season. The best part about Mahogany is its fantastic tree terrain, so I primarily recommend skiing various glades in the pod over these two mogul runs. Finally, let's talk about by far the most exciting terrain in the Mahogany pod, Fish Creek Canyon, which consists of all of this extreme terrain lookers left of the Mahogany Ridge lift. Fish Creek Canyon is home to, by far, the most challenging and unique terrain on the mountain. Lines here are much longer, much more remote, and more high consequence than the Mount Werner chutes, so I'd recommend starting there before heading over here. Fish Creek Canyon was formerly a very popular backcountry zone among locals, and even though it's been incorporated into the resort, it still rides like the backcountry from my experience. Like the Mount Werner chutes, I definitely recommend bringing a partner here, as this is not a place you want to be riding alone. Steamboat has also provided some very helpful visuals of each line in Fish Creek located at the top of each gate, so I highly recommend analyzing them thoroughly before dropping in. Most of the Fish Creek Canyon gates are accessed directly off the Mahogany Ridge lift, with the exception of the Nostrils gate, which requires a very short walk to access. I hate that I have to say this, but because I've seen dozens of people exit into the backcountry at the top of Nostrils with zero avalanche gear, I feel like I have to warn you all. If going into the backcountry, carry a beacon, probe, and shovel. Know the terrain you're getting into. Always ski with a partner. If entirely unfamiliar, go with a guide. Don't be stupid. Alright, all that out of the way, we'll start from the top of the canyon with the Nostrils gate and work our way down. Nostrils is one of the rowdiest lines in this zone. The gate is completely hidden from the top of Mahogany, and you need to know exactly where you're going to find it. The top section consists of some of the narrowest trees in all of Fish Creek Canyon. Think Needle's Eye at Breckenridge, but even steeper and just about as tight, if you know. Several lines here require mandatory straight lining just because of how tight the tree spacing is. Luckily, past the first section, the run opens up a little. For the coolest line, I recommend going as far skiers ride as possible, so you end up right next to the towering cliffs above you. Endless Gully is accessed via a bit of catwalking from the top of the Mahogany lift. While it's not as intense as Nostrils, it's a great line that is often home to excellent snow and really playful trees and drops. Granola Bowl is probably the most mellow and popular route down this part of Fish Creek Canyon since it's accessed right off the top of the Mahogany lift. It's fairly short, as you have to traverse halfway down to avoid a major cliff band. I definitely prefer the upper two lines. This isn't clear on the trail map, but these three gates access various parts of this upper section of Fish Creek Canyon, and there is a ridge that separates these three gates and the remaining Fish Creek lines from Ultimate Glades and down. Nostrils, Endless Gully, and Granola Bowl all filter into this massive unmarked boulder field, not to be confused with the marked boulder field area under Ultimate Glades. As expected, this area is home to some outstanding pillows. From here, ride down a bit further and make sure to catch the exit traverse and not accidentally ski all the way down into Fish Creek. The traverse isn't exactly well marked, so just be on the lookout for other people's tracks. The remaining gates are accessed via the Edge of the World run, which, as we discussed, is a fairly awful mogul run. The Ultimate Glades gate is the most popular way down the Fish Creek Canyon because of how accessible and prominent its entrance is from the Mahogany lift. You can probably see where this is going, but I recommend avoiding this area if you aren't one of the first ones down. Don't get me wrong, as the name implies, the Ultimate Glades is home to some solid tree skiing, but it isn't nearly as unique as some other places in Fish Creek Canyon. Ultimate Glades filters onto Boulder Field, which is home to some more great pillow lines before merging onto the hike out. A bit further down Edge of the World is Milk Run, which was marked on the 2024 trail map but doesn't appear on the 2025 trail map. This name was removed due to inaccuracies pointed out by locals, and as such, we won't cover it. The next gate down is the entrance into Two-Step. Two-Step is a pretty gnarly area, featuring really steep, tight trees with lots of natural obstacles. I would say it's the third toughest named zone in Fish Creek, behind the aforementioned Nostrils and our next discussion point, Bird's Beak. Bird's Beak itself is a large rock formation with fantastic vistas out across the canyon and part of the Yampa Valley. If you ski right off the front of the beak, you'll have a series of large drops all the way down. My preferred route, however, is to go down the skier's right side of the rock. This is extremely steep and tight, and I would go as far as to claim that this specific line is one of, if not the most technical in all of Steamboat. Not many people go this way, so it keeps good snow, but this is a seriously difficult line, so be very cautious. Exiting Fish Creek can be an absolute pain. The signs will all warn you that there's a 30-minute hike out, and while it's not a hike in the true sense of the word, depending on your pace, it can take up to 30 minutes from the uppermost lines. It's a traverse with lots of sidestepping, and you'll have to go about double as far if you come from the upper three gates versus the lower zones. It also gets quite busy, and you can't really pass anyone, so you may not have full control of your pace. Overall, it's better than a true hike, but do not underestimate the difficulty and nature of this exit path. I find it worth lapping, but many will tell you that it's only worth it for one run. Note that the brunt of the hike starts a bit after Bird's Beak, so even if you enter the canyon pretty low, you'll still have to do the crux of the hike out. Alright, that about wraps it up for Steamboat's Extremes. Now go check out parts A, B, and C, all about the rest of Steamboat, or go check out another insider's guide all about other fine ski areas around the world. As always, please leave any questions down below. Thank you all so much for watching. All my love, I'm out.